those that are interested can pause it and go back and read these comments here. But if you've investigated the total solar eclipse and you understand the criteria for how they claim they occur, you will know that an annular eclipse is said to occur when the moon is closer to the sun in its orbit. And therefore you see the annulus of the sun. And it's only through this perfect alignment where it actually creates a total solar eclipse. So the idea that the umbra shadow can change size over a particular area of the earth just really makes no sense. But you know, this guy wants to pretend like it can, and how he's explained it here to where it makes sense. And then he wants to claim, well, you don't use any trig to show me how what you're saying is true. Well, in this video, I've just shown wisdom or maps produced by NASA, which showed a 70-mile wide shadow in the 2017 eclipse and a 160-mile wide shadow in Mexico from a total eclipse that occurred in '91. Now, it makes no sense that if the shadows are elongating when they're toward the top or bottom of the ball because of the curve of the earth, how would the shadow be wider when it's closer to the equator? That's opposite what we would intuitively think. And the excuse would be, well, because the moon is closer to us. Well, okay. Now we got to go down that rabbit hole. Okay. Allow me to go down finish going down the rabbit hole of the ball earth zealot that can't, counter the fact that these paths that occurred over this short span from like 2015 to 2018 that I showed at the end of this video make no sense on the ball earth, being that this path right here was occurring when they say the moon is ascending across the ecliptic plane, meaning going in this direction across the face of the sun, supposedly. Yet the shadow is going in the opposite direction of what it should be doing in every one of these paths. But these paths make circles over the real map of the earth, which is over here. But they're in opposition to what they should be doing on the ball earth if what they're telling us is true, which again show it's false. So we've got the baller zealot come along and says, look, it's not as easy as you try to make it out to be. It's not just observation. All these things come into play. Look at my little calculator that I made. The sun-earth distance plays a role in this. Shadow difference. You make hay in your video about these two eclipse paths. Why is the diameter only 70 miles wide here and 160 miles in Mexico? Something's not right. Let me show you why that is, though. See the distance from the sun to the earth here? It's further away than it is here. And the moon is actually further away from the earth in the 2017 eclipse than it is in the New Mexico. Okay? But see, what he didn't do is investigate to see, is that always true? He just wants to assume it is. As stated by NASA, the geometry of these Saros cycles repeat, and they will be the same, okay? Look here, for instance, this is Saros number 145. The diameter of the path is 70 miles wide, okay? And it's going to come back in 2071 because this is the same Saros number that occurred right here in 2017, okay? And they come back every 18 years. So by the time you get to this path here at 2071, it'll be down here over Mexico. And I'm showing this because the ball earth zealots want to tell me it's not as simple as I portray. It's not just observations. Several things must be considered: the distance of the sun to the earth and the distance of the moon to the earth, and the geometry of our sphere ball earth. Well, I want to rule out the geometry by simply positioning it over the same geographic area to show the anomalies or falsehood of our model. Again, I showed the path from, what was it, let's see, he's got it in his little calculator here. Yes, New Mexico, 1991, where he shows you the Earth-Sun distance in his little calculator here. He made his video, eclipse calculator, and he's trying to prove that in this particular instance, he will say, see, look, the sun is further away from the earth here, and the moon is closer to the earth than it was here, and that's why that combination results in this shadow being 160 mile wide and this shadow being 70 miles wide. Well, in the earth, in reality where we live, if you have an object casting a shadow on a wall, okay, and you move the distance further away, the shadow should get bigger. And if it's casting that shadow on a sphere, right, then the shadow should change size with respect to the location on that sphere. Again, back to this Saros 145 again from 2017, it being up in the northern hemisphere, the shadow you would expect being on the curve here would widen as compared to it centrally located down here in Mexico, but the reverse is true, okay? Opposite what you would expect is always seems to be the case, but not always. And that's why I bring this up. That's not always the case. And these anomalies is what prove that it's a lie. So again, let's go back and look at this anomalies. Allow me to reiterate another fact about this eclipse path from Saros 145. It's only 74 miles wide down here over Mexico. As it relates to the 1991 path that had 160 mile diameter with these distances. Let's go over here and look at SunCalc telling us it's this many kilometers away, 150 from the Earth, when compared to this one that had a 70 mile wide shadow. We're, what, 1 million kilometers less. This is 152. And mooncalc.org, 367,000. And again, 371. So we're talking about distance difference of roughly 2,600 miles. But yet it passes over here and it's only a 74 mile wide shadow, when this one here is 160. So again, maybe you need to redo your umbra calculator, or it's just not true. Which is it? When the thing repeats over the same geographic area, why is it only 74 miles wide? If it's the moon and all these distances and the geometry of everything is what makes the size change, Brother Paul, why is it that the shadow is only 74 miles? Please explain. This path here in 1991 over Mexico is 160 miles wide. The one in 2071 from Saros 145 is 74 miles, and it was 70 when it was here. This is how you know, because whatever Saros number it is, the geometry of the path is the same, and the diameter of the path is always nearly the same. That's how you know it's not the moon. It's these 39 separate objects. Wake up. If you'll look right here, that path at its widest point, 74 miles. See? You can't get around it. When you try to come up, when these baller zealots try to come up with excuses for the lies in the model, it just contradicts itself if you investigate it. Let me address baller zealots' defense of our model by trying to explain away the width difference that we see in these paths that give credence to the fact that it's not what they claim. For example, normal shadows on the Earth appear larger when the object is further away from, like a wall that you're casting the shadow on. The shadow tends to grow. When the object casting the shadow is closer to, say, the wall, the shadow is smaller. But in this instance, they want the baller zealot would try to explain to me with a mathematical construct that in reality, for example, this 2024 path over the United States, the shadow is 122 miles wide. Now, the moon, according to the zealots, is 223,600 miles from the Earth when this occurs, right? Knowing the curvature of the ball Earth, meaning they explain away large widened paths at the polar regions because of the curve of the Earth, this here denotes where the sun is when this takes place, near the same distance at the same location or region that the happens or occurred at the 2017 August eclipse. If you recall, that map shows the sun centered about in the same area, but yet the path went the opposite direction and it was only 70 miles wide. But again, the moon was 231,000 miles away, so it's much further. Now, if you'll go back to the July 1991 total solar eclipse, it kind of goes in a path like this over the same general area right here in Mexico, which is close to the equator, right? And again, that size there, the path's diameter is 160 miles wide, crossing over the same geographic territory. You can't really claim the moon distance explains that, because at that time of the occurrence of this particular eclipse in 91, the moon is said to be 222,300 miles away, so roughly 1,300 miles closer than this path right here. But yet it's larger when it's crossing over the equatorial region. That makes no sense. It should be larger on the curved Earth up here, right? Just again, another proof that belies the model. In an attempt to edify ball Earth zealots like Paul here and others who wish to claim it's not as simple as I make it out to be, there's several factors that make up the diameter of the shadow of the umbra that's cast on the Earth, and it's changing size due to these factors and not the fact that I claim, since NASA states there are 39 unique paths or saros cycles in operation at any given time. These things are achieve different paths and whatnot, and the diameter. That's what it is. But he wants to double down and try to act like he can explain why the diameter size of the shadow umbra changes on the Earth from different ones. Like this particular one in 1991 was 160 miles wide. The 2017 eclipse was only 70 miles wide. So in order to put this to bed, I've went and done a little bit more research to prove, look here, anytime you're talking about a sphere, logically, if the path is right at the equator, you would assume it would be a smaller diameter, but that is not the case. This path here is nearly 147 miles wide at the greatest eclipse time. See there? Right here, path width at the greatest point, 238 kilometers, like I said, 147 miles wide. But not only that, let's get into these details here, because he wants to claim that even though it was over North America, the shadow was way smaller than when it was in Mexico, which is counterintuitive to what we would expect. He wants to claim it's because of these distance changes. And it's closer to the Earth, so you would think something closer would cast a smaller shadow, but here in the world that this fellow lives in, it's opposite. Well, if that's true, it should always be that way, but not really. Let's get in the details. So this date here, 1901, which is this eclipse that I'm talking about, okay, 260,000 kilometers away from the Earth, okay? Here, we're 271, so we're talking about a distance difference of roughly 7,100 miles, okay? Now, the distance to the sun is about the same, okay? See, May 18th, 1901, as the distance to the Earth and Sun here, okay? This is 322. Pretty much identical with respect to this here. So why would it be that that shadow cast on the equator, which it should be smaller, is twice the size of this one? Do you have a math umbra calculator that can explain that? I probably won't hear about this no more. This is just another example how they use this newspeak, as I call it. If you can see, this web page was updated 2018 when compared to the 1986 version of what they said. The predictions are made on this, and that'll probably say it's a computer model or something. But anyhow, they go on to tell you the accuracy in the northern and southern edges are off by approximately 1 or 2 kilometers. And it's due to lunar limb profile, or, the Earth's rotation, and due to tidal forces or friction. And you see all of this stuff reinforcing this ball Earth garbage and it moving and the moon being the cause of all this stuff. For those ball earthers out there that want to poo-poo the idea that if you're looking at a date on a web page by these liars published after flat Earth became a thing, like this one in 2018, you're going to start seeing garbage when they talk about how they predict it. And you'll click on that and it'll talk about a computer program. But see, prior to flat Earth becoming mainstream, you didn't see none of that. And in case you want to think that's just coincidence, allow me to show you what I've been telling you a long time, and that is the truth is in the anomaly. Again, when you look at this canon of eclipses, what did they say as far as gathering the information, predictions? See here, they talk about theories, math formulas, more or less, no computer, programs. And then pre-1950s, historical records. 1955 to present, published observations. So with each observation, and these things repeat every 18 years, they get more and more accurate. That's how this stuff is done. Again, look at the date this was uploaded, and now look at the acknowledgments they give you on the predictions. And again, they're going to tell you that's a computer program. It should be pointed out that the secular acceleration of the moon is very poorly known and may not be constant. Careful records for its derivation only go back as far as 100 years or so. Before then, spurious and often incomplete eclipse observations from the medieval and ancient manuscripts comprised the database. Remember, I told you the spreadsheet, the 5,000-year canon of eclipses? In any case, the current value implies an increase in the length of the day by about 0.001 second per century. Such a trivial amount may seem insignificant, but it has very measurable cumulative effects in 1 century. We're jumping down here, skipping through the atomic clock and all that garbage, just to tell you here that solar eclipse predictions are now based on this terrestrial dynamical time, but the position of the central eclipse path still depends on universal time. So they're still using the same formula they were using before, is basically what they're saying. Unfortunately, it's impossible to predict how delta T and TDT will vary in the future. At best, the current trends can be extrapolated, but the result values of delta T will inevitably diverge from actual observations. As such observations become available, corrections to the eclipse path longitudes can be calculated as follows, and then they use this math formula to correct them. But they're getting better and better as they more precisely time them in the future. So the one that occurs now will be better timed 18 and whatever days later when it comes back. Nothing to do with a mathematical model, computer program, or your heliocentric junk. Time and date, universities are all getting their information from these people. This is the straight skinny from the 1986 article. If you're getting your information from a website published after, say, 2015, the 2018, they're going to start talking about laser rangers on the moon and all this other gobbledygook to try and pretend like that's how they're doing it. But it all comes back to observations.
Since there are millions of people starting to question the shape of the Earth and how it moves, it's important that we go over all of the things that would have to be possible or seen throughout history for them to be right. For example, if they were right and the Earth had this firmament above it, like they say it does, there would be some sort of treaty preventing us from going far enough to explore and determine if they are correct. And the world leaders would make sure that they kept this treaty in place throughout every war, every conflict, and they would do so peacefully. They would then go on to spend countless billions of dollars on showing us proofs that the Earth is a globe, and they would do so deceitfully and find ways to make these images become part of our pop culture. They would also create a design of creation that has the words of these false god names that the Bible tells us not to mention. And there would be centuries upon centuries of artifacts that reveal who they all worship and pay tribute to. There would also be prophecies of this upcoming deception, a warning of how our thoughts would err concerning what's above us. The Bible itself would even tell us that earth is fixed and immovable, that it's stationary, that it has foundations. And if they were correct, everyday people would go out and do experiments that prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that water doesn't curve. And they would repeat these observations time and time again. And if they were correct, the space agencies would have to make fake pictures of Earth because they wouldn't be able to go high enough to take an actual photo of what we live on. Their own animators would have to admit that the Earth was photoshopped because it has to be.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
It is photoshopped, but it's has to be.
It just didn't look realistic. It looks kind of flat. It looks kind of flat.
There's artistry to creating the world.
These same space agencies would also be caught many times using technology that is designed to deceive us into believing they are somewhere that they aren't. If this model was made up by the enemy, it would bear the mark of the enemy.
And his number is 600, 66.
And if there was some sort of firmament above us, scientists would have detected it, and there would be a cover story made up about what it is. They would probably tell us something crazy like there's a man-made bubble surrounding Earth. We would also have footage of this barrier, along with documents that tell us that it exists.
They're checking out the firmament in this one, 1953 now. In the investigations, two instruments designed by V.G. Fezenkov were used. One of these was a visual photometer of the daytime sky intended for measuring the brightness of the firmament, and derived, get this now, on the assumption of a flat Earth. So the Russians are trying to check out the firmament based on assumptions of a flat Earth in 1957?
And if our world leaders were as evil as they say they are, they might have even tried to blow it up at some point in time.
Thor, launched by a pod-carrying Thor missile. Its yield was 1.4 megatons.
And if Earth wasn't flying through space at hundreds of times faster than the speed of sound, there would be a star in the sky that is stationary and has been throughout history. And if Earth were the stationary center of existence, that would mean there's a loving Father above us, and that for thousands of years, those who have tried to spread truth about Him would have been persecuted. The words that were written in books about Him would be banned in many places. People would be burned for trying to write these books in their own languages. And most importantly, if they were correct, the short-term pleasures of this world and the distractions that leave us feeling empty could be replaced with joy unspeakable that is found in one truth, the truth that sets you free, that is more important than what we live on, but has been hidden in a very crafty way by the evil ones that run this place. And I ask that all of you look up for a change and find that truth and that grace that we do not deserve, that is beyond measure and understanding. Because after all, if they are correct, and they are, then you are a beloved creation of the Most High, and it's time to give Him a chance.